Guys, I just did post the new page of notes, and I apologize. I guess I just didn't realize they weren't in there. There's two more slides of notes on civil rights. I'll post one with the video today and then do the other one tomorrow. Okay, so this one is talking about continuation of the civil rights. Yesterday was a little bit more background knowledge, whereas today it's getting in to more specifics about the movements and the people that are taken place from the 1950s into the 1960s. So we know after Brown versus Board of Education goes through, we have some major movements that start up. You've got the 1960 Greensboro sit-in. We can be really proud that this happened just right up the road from us in Greensboro, North Carolina. You've got 4 Greensboro A&T students that go in to sit down at a Woolworths. And a Woolworths is, I kind of think of it as a combination of like a cookout inside of a Walgreens, because it's a pharmacy, it's a general store, it's a restaurant, it's kind of a 3 or 4 in 1, if you will. And so colored students, or not just colored students, but colored customers weren't allowed to sit at the counters of the lunch tops. And they came in to sit down to be served. The waitress didn't take their order. The cook behind the counter didn't even act, they act like they weren't even there, like they were invisible. I guess everybody's just kind of assuming that if nobody takes their order or talks to them, they'll just get up and move. It won't cause any problems. And so the longer they sit there, the more frustrated and upset people will start to get. And they end up having food thrown at them. They end up having drink spilled on them. They end up having people that come up and burn them with cigarettes on their arms. People yelling at them, saying terrible things to them. And so it's not a good situation, but they sit there until actually the police come to stop all this and actually arrest them for blaming them for causing all this trouble. So they start a nationwide movement, and you actually get to see in the PowerPoint that it doesn't show the Greensboro 4, but it shows you an example of other students that participated in sit-ins across the United States. And it's black students, white students, male, female, it doesn't matter. Everybody's participating in this movement, trying to encourage change. Now, another good movement that's on the same page is talking about the Freedom Riders, which are riding buses throughout the South, and they're riding them in reverse order to where it was white customers in the front and colored customers in the back. They're actually reversing it to where colored customers or colored students are riding in the front, white students are riding in the back, and they get word that as they're riding that they're going to be met with a mob that's actually legit. I mean, I realize it's the 1960s, but you would think this is something right out of the 1500s, that are meeting them with fire bombs and with torches to throw at the bus. And so as the bus comes by, that's exactly what happens. They throw these fire bombs and torches. The bus catches on fire. They have to They have to stop and pull over, and there's a student on there that says, I'm going to get off first, because I know whoever gets off first is probably going to get the snot beat out of them. And so he volunteers to get off first in front of other people, and he does. He ends up being hospitalized. He gets his face knocked in. It's not a good situation. But if there's anything good that's supposed to come out of all this, it's that it's put in newspapers and magazines all across the United States, all across the world, and people get to see what's happening. And it's an embarrassment, really, that we are so backwards, that we're still experiencing civil violence and issues with segregation, whereas other countries, they haven't had problems like this for a very long time. We're still kind of backwards in our thinking as far as segregation and race goes. So it shows you 3 out of the 4 in your PowerPoint, and then it shows you another example of another sit-in movement. Now, Birmingham, Alabama and Montgomery, Alabama are a hot spot for civil rights violence. This one talks about what's happening in Birmingham, Alabama. These nonviolent protesters, which are following Martin Luther King Jr.'s preachings of nonviolence. They're doing pray-ins, they're doing sit-ins and other types of demonstrations, and they're being met with fire hoses. And if you've ever seen water come out of fire hose, it's enough to just take your skin right off your bones. So it's a really painful experience. So they're having fire hoses used on them. They're having police dogs attack them, all to try and get them to disperse and go home. But again, if there's anything good that's coming out of this, it's the publicity. It's the pictures being put in the newspaper and put all across the United States of what's going on with these nonviolent protesters. And this is to get people's attention that change needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. So again, it talks about all the bad publicity that they're getting from this. The Justice Department has to step in because lawsuits are being filed all across the United States, not just in the South, about what's been happening. This is right before Kennedy is assassinated. Again, it says April of '63, so this is 6 months before Kennedy's assassinated. He voices his support for civil rights. You see pictures of people being attacked by dogs. James Meredith. James Meredith applies to go to the University of Mississippi. He is a World War II Air Force vet that is denied admission, originally denied admission, based on nothing other than his race. And JFK ends up sending in 500, can you imagine 500 people to protect one person? 500 federal troops to escort him on campus. Of course, he knows things are going to happen, so riots break out everywhere. We're going to fast forward just a little bit. You also, again, speaking of Alabama, you've got George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, who actually had blocked integration into several of Alabama schools, not just secondary and primary schools, but also colleges. He ends up trying to run for president in 1968, and he gets shot. Doesn't kill him, it just paralyzes him. But again, remember, 68 is the time where Robert Kennedy is trying to run for election too, and he's assassinated and killed when he is shot in 68. So we know that several times, starting with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, several presidents end up having to pull in the National Guard because local officials and towns are fighting this idea of integration. It's terrible. And then you've got August of '63, Martin Luther King Jr. gives his famous I Have a Dream speech. And he does this in front of no other better place than the Lincoln Memorial. So they pick '63 because it is the centenary, the 100th year anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation that officially ended slavery. So it's a perfect time. He actually has, he writes his speech while he's in a jail cell after he has been arrested for a protest measure, again, peaceful protesting. But he writes his I Have a Dream speech, and he gives it in front of the Lincoln Memorial, August of '63, encouraging people not to get down about what they're seeing, and let's keep pushing, let's keep fighting. It's not over, it's not going to be over anytime soon, but let's definitely not give up on this. So civil rights has several bumps in the road. One of the big bumps in the road is the Kennedy assassination in November of '63. Things are a little rocky then. Things kind of get put on hold, but LBJ Johnson takes over and says that he promises that he will continue what Kennedy would have wanted with the civil rights movement. He ends up passing and signing the Civil Rights Act of '64, which ends all discrimination in public places. He does this in honor of JFK and what he knew he wanted. We also have the passage of the 24th Amendment, which is the ending of poll tax. So no more poll tax. You don't have to pay to vote anymore. So to vote for free, the 24th Amendment. So no more poll tax. We have Freedom Summer that happens in 1964, to where African Americans all across the United States are coming together and trying to hit these deep southern states to encourage people to go and register to vote if they are not registered to vote already, encouraging them to come out and vote. Don't be scared to vote. So they're going to places like Alabama and Mississippi, and in Alabama they actually go on what they call the March for Freedom, which is marching 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. And there's a movie somewhere, maybe it's on Amazon, or maybe I don't think it's on Netflix, but it's called Selma, and it is highlighting this Freedom Summer and the 50 miles that JFK, Martin Luther King Jr. and his followers are marching to encourage people to not just sign up to vote and register to vote, but to make sure they actually go and vote in the election. They call it Bloody Sunday. We've got 70 people that are hospitalized. Just the whole nation is stunned because this was another nonviolent protest. The sheriff and sheriff deputies are trying to get them to disperse and go home just because they don't like what they're doing. They're not doing anything wrong. We know later that the Voting Rights Act of '65 will also be passed, which makes it illegal to try and push the grandfather clause and literacy test. So we're making all those things illegal that could possibly be stopping people from practicing their civil rights. Okay, that is actually it. I thought there were a couple more things in here. Now, the only thing from yesterday that I didn't finish talking about that I wanted to was that very last slide in your PowerPoint talking about the Little Rock Nine. And I love pictures. Pictures are worth 1,000 words sometimes, and say more than what you could write or talk about. But the Little Rock Nine, you got 9 students, high school students, that must have had just balls of steel. Because I can't imagine how scary it would be that they were willing to go into a newly segregated southern school, and they were being blocked. Eisenhower had to call in federal troops to escort these students into school, and if you can imagine what that would be like, that people are threatening your life, and you're just a high school student, that people don't want you there. You want the best education you can get, and so that that's a necessary move, but it's scary knowing that people are threatening you, your life, your family, your friends. It's a really scary situation. And so these 9 students go up against everything else, everybody else, to take advantage of pushing for a better education and way of life for themselves. But if you look at those pictures, especially that last picture, I think she's towards the middle, there's a woman on there, a girl, I think. She's supposed to be a high school student. But just her expression on her face, the hatred on her face that she has for this African American student who she doesn't even know, but she knows the color of her skin, and because of that, she has this intense hatred for her. And I talked about this a little bit on the video the other day, and that's how we know that it is, it's almost like in psychology, we talk about the idea of nature versus nurture. We're not born coming out thinking blue is right and green is wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not born that way. That's why a lot of how we think and function is nurture, how we're brought up, what we're taught, what we experience. And so as you become an adult, you have the option to change your opinion and think how you want. But a lot of how you think is based off of what you've experienced growing up, you know? Well, why are you Republican? Well, because mom and dad are Republican. We usually vote Republican. That's what we think. Well, why are you Democrat? You know, well, mom and dad are Democrats. We usually vote. You get what I'm saying, okay? So a lot of it has to do with what you hear, what you're taught, what you see, what you're around. And so if you are around individuals that think a certain way, you know, we don't like green. We just don't like the color green. Nobody here likes the color green. We don't use green. We don't have green. We don't wear green. You know, that will impact you later on in life. So, unfortunately, it's just changing mindset, which is a lot easier said than done, unfortunately. So it is a long, hard road, and you'll see that it is nowhere close to being over as we go through the rest of the semester, what we have left. But I mean, even today, you know, we still see it today that there's a lot of injustice. There's still plenty of people that don't like other people based on just race, gender, religion. It is what it is. So, anyway, I will leave you on that note and see you guys tomorrow.